The tension has been heightened since a Vietnamese oil exploration vessel confronted a Chinese surveillance boat earlier this month. Last Monday, Vietnam conducted a live-fire naval drill in what it claims to be an exclusive economic zone in the South China Sea. On the following day, Vietnamese Prime Minister issued a decree about a potential military call-up. China claims rights to most of the energy-rich area covering 3.5 million square kilometers. As a gesture to Hanoi and other claimants, China has sent its biggest patrol vessel across its claimed region. China said the operation was a legitimate patrol and reasserts its stand on a peaceful resolution.
中方是在维护自己的正当权益。
Another active player on the waters is the Philippines, who removed markers placed by China from several disputed islands. Later this month, it would join the U.S. forces in a 10-day live-fire exercise in the region, an eye-catching move yet declared to be a routine practice. Behind all the drills is a shared partner, the United States. During last year's ASEAN ministerial meetings, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton offered helping hands to the South China Sea dispute, which China is against. Last week, the U.S. led 5 ASEAN countries in a 10-day naval exercise in the Sulu Sea, Malacca Strait, and Celebes Sea. On Beijing Street, the South China Sea dispute has also aroused heated discussions.
I think that Vietnam's reaction to China's action is a kind of a challenge because the South China Sea has been China's territory since ancient times. They have no right to conduct a military drill there.
As a Chinese, I think the Chinese government needs to be forceful enough this time. The Philippines and the other countries are watching to see China's reaction. So it's like this time, if China allows Vietnam to carry out this kind of activities against it, I think there will be some negative impacts.
Saber-rattling, accusations and claims of rights, none seems to be pushing forward the progress of settling down the dispute.
Welcome back to the studio discussion here. Ambassador Ma and Professor Mei, do you think Vietnam is ready for a showdown?
You see, Vietnam has taken serious action recently, including the Premier's decree for more troops and orders of some warships from Russia and so on. And also in the country, they also organize demonstrations in front of the Chinese embassy. From all this, we can see that is a kind of action of impairing China's sovereignty and as well as the maritime rights interests. So I think this is a really serious provocation. But at the same time, you see, according to my long-term observation of the situation, I don't think Vietnam is ready to engage a real war with China or to have a real showdown. In the first place, I think if we compare the military strength of two countries or the total national strength of two countries, I think there's a big gap. I think Vietnam itself cannot compare with China. 2, Vietnam tried to win the support of the United States. I also have a doubt whether the United States will really give Vietnam support in fighting against China. 3rd, Vietnam probably want to gather support for ASEAN countries. I don't believe the whole ASEAN countries, 10 countries, will support Vietnam totally. So from this point of view, if in the really remain clear mind, I think Vietnam must give a lot of consideration to the real situation there. Maybe they want to make a show.
Professor Mei, it seems a majority of the Chinese here in the mainland have been surprised by one incident after another in quick succession that took place in Vietnam. For example, the Vietnamese leaders asked the U.S. to join the negotiations with China over the disputed waters, and then demonstrations took place in front of the Chinese embassy. The recent decree by the Vietnamese Prime Minister for a military call-up. And as Ambassador Ma said, 6 submarines have been ordered from Russia in a show of force. What do you think of their readiness to have a real combat?
Well, I think the key thing is when you talk about a showdown, what is this showdown? Does it mean a war with China? If it is a war with China, I don't think that is the case. I don't think Vietnam really wants to have a war with China. Well, so and does Vietnam wants to let all these provocation go out of hand so that they can't manage it anymore? Personally, I don't think that is the case. They want to do something, but they also have their limit there. For example, they are joining China in the joint patrol, and it is reported that they are going to send naval ships to visit China. So you see, they are playing the two hands, I mean, at the same time, which shows that they are not ready and they do not really want to have a genuine showdown with China.
But the rise of nationalism in Vietnam threatens to derail the healthy relationship between the two countries in Asia. What do you think of the current parliamentary elections in Hanoi, as well as the rise of inflation? Do you think both have served to add to the current public anger, and therefore something got to be done to play up the external threat to divert public attention from domestic economic woes?
That is, I mean, part of the explanation maybe, but I would say that the arousing this nationalism, or actually nationalism in the real sense of the word, is a double-edged sword. It can help them get out of certain troubles, but at the same time it can also get them into more troubles. So they have to play that, I mean, very carefully.
And do you think the same danger will apply to the national situation here in China, the domestic situation in China? Ultranationalism serves as a double-edged weapon, and if you cannot handle it properly, it serves to destabilize the social situation. Right?
I think that I agree with the Professor Mei. I think there are a lot of comments also from the Chinese press or even foreign press that the nationalist feelings could have two sides. Sometimes can to give some support to the government for some action. At the same time, it could also create some troubles.
But I'm afraid most of the young people in China cannot be persuaded by rhetorics of diplomacy or peaceful solution because of the military build-up in this country over the past decade. And they say it's time for China to flex its muscles and to face down any external threats to our territorial sovereignty. What do you think, Professor Mei?
Well, I think because I am a professor of diplomatic history, so from, I mean, historical point of view, over the years, you can see very clearly that foreign relations, diplomacy, is not something that grows out of a kind of emotion response. It has to be rather rational. It has to balance the interest, your short-term interest, your long-term interest, your goals, your strategy. Without that, if it's just a response to an individual event, you might get into a scrape.
But I'm afraid, Ambassador Ma and Professor Mei, that the disputed islets in South China Sea are 1,000 miles from the mainland of the PRC. But they are 160 miles from Vietnam and somehow 100 miles from the Philippines. These are the two major claimants in the competing territorial claims over the Spratly Islands. So how could China effectively protect the territorial waters that China declares it has the sovereignty over?
I think the capability to defending a country's territory or sovereignty relies on your strength. If the country is well developed, you would have the capability to do anything. At the same time, I think we also must increase or build up your defense capability. I think now we are doing this. So the most important in my mind is how to continue to develop our country, to make China stronger than before. At the same time, we should develop our national defense capabilities. In that case, I think from a long-term point of view, concerning this sort of thing, I think we should think of long-term interests, not only focus on the gain or loss of one day, one time.
But still, Professor Mei, how shall we deal with the rising public anger? It's not just the escalation of tensions between China and the rest of those rivalry claimants. What about the rise of nationalism?
Well, I think this is also one of the jobs of the media. The media's report has to be rather balanced, has to give people room to think about the thing.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to cross over to Joanna Lei, who's standing by in Taipei. Hello.
Thank you, Yang Rui.
Hi, Joanna. What do you think of the position so far of Taipei towards the disputed waters in South China Sea?
Well, certainly Taipei, due to the exclusion from the international community, has been rather silent in terms of the dispute. However, Taipei has been the most longest standing party that has permanent residence in the most major part of the disputed water, namely in the Itu-Aba of Spratly Islands. They have historically been supported and stationed with military and Coast Guard personnel. So if we look at the conditions under which any party can claim the economic interest of the area, Taipei certainly has a very strong position to also claim economic interest within the area.
We are aware that Ma Ying-jeou keeps a distance from the official position of Beijing on the negotiations about the code of conduct in the disputed waters. For example, Taipei makes it very clear that it's in favor of having a dialogue with a multilateral mechanism, whilst Beijing says, we prefer to have a one-on-one talk with the claimants. Now, what do you think of the differences between the mainland and Taiwan?
Well, certainly at the current situation outlined by you with the 2002 Code of Conduct, it is hardly likely that you could resolve the situation with bilateral negotiations one-on-one. It is highly likely that you will resolve into some kind of multi-party negotiation at the very end. So in that sense, while Taiwan was absent and silent in the last round of negotiation, much like in the East China Sea situation, Japan has never allowed Taiwan to stand on the table while they were negotiating with China. On the other hand, if Taiwan does come to the table, it will be with the invitation of mainland China and also cementing the claim of both Taiwan and mainland China with its long-standing historical and territorial claims. So I see this as a very major position or major step in the cross-strait relations. In the past, we were dealing with issues among the two of us across Taiwan Strait, bilateral. But wouldn't it be a great opportunity for us to collectively work on international issues in the multilateral conferences while supporting and cementing each other?
What do you think of the possibility for the two sides across the Taiwan Strait to work together and drive away the rival forces from the territorial water, the disputed territorial waters?
Well, certainly we need to be very mindful that the new condition is imposed by mainland Chinese, not only by mainland Chinese, but the United States. In June 2010, U.S. made a very, very strong position saying that this is an area of growing concern. It's not only vital to those directly borderlining it, but to all nations with economic and security interests in Asia. Namely, United States would have a very strong, in their words, growing concern and strong concern in this area. So when Asian nations, ASEAN, namely the parties in the Code of Conduct 2002, and China resolving this issue will resolve in greater scale in terms of international negotiation. Let me just say it very quickly. Taiwan has a lot to bring to the table. Taiwan has long been stationing manpower, people in Ituaba. It established a very long, useful jurisdiction, and it also has a very strong historical claim. So if you bring Taiwan to the table, Taiwan and mainland China together can negotiate with other ASEAN parties in terms of how we jointly explore the area and exploit the resources without having external interferences. And that will be the best possible outcome for all Asian states involved.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for being with us. Welcome back to the Beijing studio discussion here. Ambassador Ma, do you think the 2002 Code of Conduct concerning maritime disputes in the South China Sea has been violated by the claimants concerned here?
I think you see China stand for the DOC because that's a common consensus among the parties concerned, and they lay down very important principle, that is each side should devote the efforts to keep peace and stability in this area, and they should not make this area troubled water and so on. Yeah. I think the Vietnam behavior or the Philippines behavior actually is not fully respected to all these principles. I still believe that's probably the best principle we can respect now.
At Hanoi's conference, that is about American position of the South China Sea issue. That, I think, was an intention of getting involved or meddle with this issue. So whether the United States would like to see a sort of conflict or tension between China and some of these countries, that's one thing. Whether the United States wants to let the tension get out of hand, that is another thing. I think they do want to see some sort of tension because that will give them a bigger role to play and would draw these Asian countries to the American side. That is one thing. But when the confrontation comes to a point that it might get out of hand, then I don't think the United States wants to get involved there.
No party in the current conflict will allow this to spin out of control, obviously, but Mr. John Huntsman, former U.S. ambassador to China, said recently at a regional forum in Asia that the current tensions in the South China Sea has provided the U.S. with an enormously powerful opportunity to rally all the parties concerned behind the U.S., I mean those ASEAN countries behind the U.S. Do you think that this is an attempt by the White House to exercise soft containment to slow down China's peaceful rise?
You see, if you look at the relationship between the United States and the ASEAN countries, you can see over the past decade or so that was not very warm because the U.S. has not paid enough attention to this area. Since last year, the Obama administration claimed to return to Asia, particularly in this area, and probably they are clever to find the right point, that is South China Sea. So State Secretary Mrs. Clinton tried very hard to use this to sow discord in the relation between China and some ASEAN countries. And one very bad practice or clever practice confused two issues into one. That is, in the South China Sea area, there are two questions actually. One is sovereignty over the islands and adjacent waters. There are some dispute between China and a few countries. The other is the free passage for South China Sea. The second question, there has never been any problem, but the United States claim that that's also the United States' interests to have a free passage of the water. So that's
freedom of navigation.
Yeah, so that's the confused two, and then try to stand on the side of some country like Vietnam. In that way, they somehow successful in gaining the support of some ASEAN countries.
Despite the complaints by some of the member states of ASEAN about Vietnam none of the 10 member states of ASEAN want to take side between the US, China, for example. Now, China prefers to have a bilateral dialogue with the parties concerned, the claimants in the South China Sea. But it seems China's position has been pretty lonely and isolated. One Italian correspondent said recently and privately that should China have a showdown with other claimants in the South China Sea, then all of the countries in the West will definitely choose to take side with what they call the weak victims, like Hanoi and Manila, so on and so forth. What do you think of their views?
And that's why I think our foreign ministry from the very beginning made it very clear that China wanted to solve the problem peacefully. We are not going to use force, and we are adhere to the 2002 agreement on that. So this is a basic thing. So thinking that the provocation would get China into shooting the first gun, that is...
But still, I'm afraid, forgive me if I put it bluntly.
Yeah.
Ambassador Ma and you probably represent the views of the elder generation. But if you look at the internet generation, they respect Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping highly, simply because at the critical moment they would turn to the use of force to safeguard the dignity and the territorial sovereignty of China. Look at what happened in 1979, the border clash between Vietnam and Beijing. And Deng Xiaoping never hesitated to use force to teach Vietnam a lesson. Look, you got to be serious with us. And,
but don't forget, how many years anger piling up until we made the decision in 1979? A number of years, long years. So it's not as I think, and about Mao Zedong the same. Even, I mean, now the archive material show that Mao Zedong and the Central Committee actually hesitated for a long time before they finally decided to enter the Korean War. So they are not rash in making the decision. Today it's the same. As I said at the very beginning, now if my answer is correct, these countries do not really want to actually fight a war with China.
Excuse me, but we have to draw a line, don't we? We have to draw a red line. Now, if you cross the red line, we have zero tolerance. And we definitely have to do something to ease the public anger back at home. Ambassador Ma, what do you think of this concern?
I think you see the dispute over summer airlines in the South China Sea area is not a new issue. That's last for a long time, at least in the past 20 or 30 years already. And I haven't seen too much new development in the whole area. We must have a long-term consideration combined with the immediate interests. I think for, as we call the old generation, probably we think more about that point. You look at the world situation now, it's not a time to settle dispute through any military means. I think China stands for peaceful settlement all disputes. And in such a time, when China is getting stronger, and normally many countries, particularly in the West, they have a kind of feeling for worriedness.
But I'm afraid the Chinese leadership faces two kinds of threats, internal and external.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand what internal threat actually means, Professor Mei.
Yeah, this again, this is the double edge of nationalism. That's natural. I think, for those who argue that we should now flex our muscles, are actually putting China in an indefensible position, rather. That is, because you are strong, so you can do this. Whether you are on the right side or on the wrong side. We say we are on the right side. On the right side, we first argue, and we do have a bottom line. The bottom line is the status quo. If you violate that, if you actually send warships to occupy some of the unoccupied islands in the South Sea, that would be a totally different matter.
Thank you very much for your views. We foresee media fanfare concerning the completion of the first aircraft carrier by the Chinese Blue Water Navy. Perhaps that will take place on July the 1st. Until next time, I'm Yang Rui. Goodbye.